Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for today's tool talk on unlocking growth for Indian tool makers in electronics manufacturing. And to discuss the same, we have a special guest from Tata Electronics, Mr. Jim Walsh, Vice President Tooling, Tata Electronics. This tool talk is powered by SNT Group. So, may I request the college to play the AV on SNT Group, and then we'll start the talk. In the meantime, people will also join. All right, that's about SNT Group that has kind of sponsored this particular tool talk, and a little bit about today's subject on electronics and semiconductor industry. And as you all know, that this industry is kind of a booming continuously, and there has been a lot of movement happening in this industry. At the moment, the electronics market is valued at around 155 billion, and continuously in our growth trajectory with about 65% of the production happens in India itself. And last year in financial year 2023, India exported electronics worth 22.7 billion, which was huge amount. So this also kind of highlights the opportunities available for the Indian tool makers who can grab this opportunity. And to discuss this thing in detail, we have someone who has got a huge experience in the electronics tooling industry, Mr. Jim Walsh, Vice President of Tooling, Tata Electronics. Welcome, Jim. Thanks for accepting our invitation. And from Tagma Fraternity and Tagma Management, I welcome you for the tool talk session.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm honored to be here.
Thanks. So, Jim, you are anyways very famous man in Indian tooling fraternity. But just to introduce everyone about your career, may I introduce a little bit in detail? Mr. James Walsh is an accomplished and highly regarded professional in the field of plastic injection molding, bringing an impressive 45 years of hands-on experience to his role as Vice President and Tooling and at Tata Electronics. With a career characterized by technical mastery and commitment to excellence, Mr. Walsh has made incredible contribution to precision mold tooling and molding domain, particularly in connector and electronic sectors. And one of Mr. J. Wall's outstanding achievement lies in his ability to cultivate and nurture engineering teams to tool room across multiple continents. And with remarkable track record of establishing robust tool room and engineering units in the USA, China, and most notably in India as part of Tata Electronics, he has demonstrated a unique talent for fostering collaborative environment that drive innovation and deliver result. Beyond his technical prowess, Mr. Walsh is equally recognized for his passion for mentorship, teaching, and team building. Again, Mr. Walsh, welcome to the Tool Talk.
Thank you. You're too kind in your introduction.
But as I said, you are a very well known person in Indian tooling industry. So to start the conversation, just to set the tone, as you come from the electronics sector, would you like to talk about the current state of Indian electronics and semiconductor industry?
Um, yeah, I would like to. Let me start by saying that I view the industry here in EMS industry in India through my lens of being a foreigner, but deeply involved. Almost 4 years now with Tata Electronics.
Right.
And at the same time, very focused on Tata Electronics business, which is up to this point been a relatively narrow scope. But I have gotten around and enjoyed networking with the TAGMA members and learned a lot about the industry just talking to people. As well as our search for tooling vendors to add to our supply chain. I've been able to, I think, see a good cross section. But anyway, the EMS industry in India, I believe, is in its infancy.
Okay.
I mean, this is really a ground floor opportunity. Right now, correct me if I'm wrong, but only around 3% of the tooling in India is related to EMS, whereas
Okay.
over 60% is automotive.
Right.
So, automotive here is very mature, and EMS is not, as far as tooling requirements go. Now, there is some overlap, which I'll get into later, but EMS tooling has its own unique characteristics. Yeah, from my world, without saying too much about our business, we're our main business at this point is mobile phones,
Right.
and the drive to move a lot of that out of China is very strong. So the future just with mobile phones type business is very promising, and that's the need for tooling is very heavy, and the volumes are huge. So when we don't just need a few molds, we need many. We don't need just a few fixtures. We need many thousands of fixtures. It's at a scope and scale just with our one customer that could keep commercial tool rooms in India very, very busy.
Right.
And then the other side of it is the semiconductors, which is really a very new development where not only Tata Electronics, I'm sure you've seen in the news that, we're making a huge and serious investment in semicon fab plant as well as the OSAT, the testing and packaging end of the semiconductors. Just with the fab plant, we're investing over, I think it was around $11 billion. So, those numbers are huge. And so the ratio between EMS and automotive in India is going to even out in a rapid way, I believe. So I don't know the future, but I know in general every company, every multinational company is actively trying to diversify themselves from China. And I've talked about this before. The getting a slice of China's pie is more than just a morsel. It's huge. And the situation is companies will move as much out of China as we could take up.
Okay.
So the ball is in our court, really, to take up this opportunity. And we need to recognize the scale of what's available in the EMS industry, the scale of opportunities coming up, and then do what we need to do to take advantage of it.
So great. You spoke about companies moving out of China, and there will be a huge opportunity. Do you think the Indian ecosystem for EMS is ready to take that kind of demand? Are we prepared enough to do that, specifically from the tooling perspective?
From what I see, not we. I'll say we are not in a great place to accept it. We're not quite ready, is what I'm saying. Not only for the scale, for the amount of opportunities that are coming, but also for the capability side. The many of the tool makers that I've seen are at a medium level at best, as far as being ready for EMS tooling. Now, let me back up and define what I mean by EMS tooling requirements. And I'll speak heavily on injection molds, because that's really my expertise.
Right.
For injection molds for plastic parts for EMS, for example, there's parts that are very heavy requirements for dimensional requirements for tight tolerances, and many tight tolerances on one part. And then the other end of the spectrum would be parts that would be less dimensional requirement heavy and more cosmetic requirements. So, any kind of electronics, you have things like the housing for the device, and things like iPhones and the earphones and things like that. The outer shape, the ID, the surface finish is extreme. Okay, that's one challenge. The other challenge is the dimensional requirements, the internal components. The extreme end of that would be connectors.
Right.
Most of my career has been in the connector industry. And
One sec. May I request everyone to please keep yourself in mute mode? Mr. Jim, can you? Yeah. Yeah.
most of my career has been in the connector industry, but I've been at both extremes. But I can speak to connectors are where there's some overlap between electronics industry and automotive, because when I was doing connectors, we did automotive connectors, we did electronic connectors, and for the most part, the requirements are similar. So, just saying automotive, automotive also has these extremes in different types, different requirements. But for sure, somebody who's adept at building molds for instrument panels or door panels is not going to make a good connector mold, because they're first of all, they're bigger molds. The tolerances are a lot looser, and the focus shifts more towards cosmetics. Whereas the connectors, they're small, intricate little jigsaw puzzles, and just unbelievable number of very, very tight tolerances, 5-10 micron tolerances.
Right.
So, EMS is same, you got both extremes. When it comes to, like fixtures, which automotive, electronics, manufacturing requires, there's probably more similarities, although with electronics, again, I think the tolerances would tend to be tighter.
Right. Right. So you spoke about India being not that prepared for take the opportunities in the electronics and semiconductor industry, specifically in the from the tooling perspective. And also you spoke that from overall demands in India, only 3% is for the EMS industry. So in your opinion, what Indian tool makers, not just tool makers, maybe government tool makers, OEM like yours or association like TAGMA, can do to kind of strengthen the overall ecosystem for this particular industry? What can be done? Or maybe you
Well,
can share some of your some of your observations from China, because you have worked very closely with Chinese and you have worked there, and Chinese electronics ecosystem is highly strong. They are very good.
yeah, the focus, I know automotive can be very demanding, no question. And like I said, India is much more mature there, but it's a different kind of demand. I would say the area that Indian tool makers are lacking as far as being ready to pick up, say, for example, Samsung or Facebook, or somebody comes in and they have an immediate need for tooling, the same tooling they had been getting in China. They come here, you see the requirements. I think the gaps are, first of all, the ability to machine to tight tolerances.
Okay.
I think there's many tool makers where, machining to a tolerance range of 20 or 30 or 40 micron, they can do all day long. But to go from that to a tolerance of a tolerance range of 5 to 10 micron is that's a big step. You can't get there from 30 or 40 micron to 10 with the same procedures, maybe it's not even with the same equipment that you have. And
Right.
it requires a different mindset. So it's I would say at the top of my list, it would be developing a mindset of precision and craftsmanship.
Okay.
The word craftsmanship resonates with me because I mean, I grew up in the industry in the U.S. 30 years in the U.S. tooling industry, and I mean, I cut my teeth on some of the most complex connector molds that I've ever seen to this day. And
Right.
that what I saw from toolmakers uh, 46 years ago now was craftsmanship. If you could define them in one word, it would be craftsman, which means they took pride in what they did, and they wouldn't put out uh, work that was not perfect. And we've lost that. Not only in India, in the West also, that's a dying thing. But I say this because we have to go back in that direction at least.
Right.
Um, developing here a culture of precision and not just precision. Maybe you figure out how to machine to 5 micron, great. But if the you put if your output, if your die or mold insert or fixture is not finished well, it's all scratched up. Your chamfering is done by hand, hand grinding or something. Then that's not craftsmanship. It's the total package, and it's really an attitude, and that's where um, the industry has to go.
Right.
I'm well aware of the challenges of um, uh, developing skilled manpower. I've had many conversations with people in the industry about that,
Right.
and the only um, just speaking from my perspective and from a few other successful tool shops,
Okay.
um, the way to develop that skilled manpower and to begin to develop that mindset of precision and craftsmanship is starting with it sounds counterintuitive, but almost starting out with people with the least amount of experience and teaching them from day one.
Okay.
Because our experience at TATA has been if somebody's got 10 or 15, 20 or more years of experience, um, and that experience is not what I just described. It's something much less. Then, they made a whole career out of mediocrity, and to convince them that you should take pride in what you do.
Right.
It's really hard to break bad habits. So the tool shops that are most successful is they take people um, right out of NTTF, SIPET,
Right.
and these places, and they haven't enough uh, skill and people in-house that can do the training and mentoring.
Okay.
The other thing they do is on one hand you want to develop skill. On the other hand, you want to design the need for skilled labor out of the system, right? So um, developing your SOPs, your work instructions so well that you can bring in somebody and have them trained it, up to at least a functional level very quickly.
Right.
Even someone with no experience, because let's face it, tool making today is not what it used to be. It used to be the tool maker knew how to run every machine, and
Right.
he'd sit down and he'd sketch it out and he'd design his own mold.
Right.
We're an industry of specialists now. VMC operator, they only know that they don't know if they're making a mold part or a die part or a fixture, they're cutting steel,
Right.
and that's not a bad thing, but that has to be optimized. That VMC operator, you don't really need him to know every aspect of the die or mold he's building,
Right.
but he needs to know that machine, and he needs to know the advanced features of that machine. He needs to know fixturing so that he can do the quickest setup and the most accurate setup, and
Right.
so forth. So it's okay that we have specialists, but those specialists need to be the best in their field, so they can be craftsmen in their own right.
Right.
Uh,
Right. So you spoke about skill development, you spoke about the developing mindset. We'll come back to that later, but at this moment, since we are talking about the Chinese, do you
mm.
think that if Indian mold makers collaborate with Chinese mold maker in some way, some sort of technology transfer way, is this going to be useful for the Indian mold makers to learn from them?
Uh, the short answer is yes, absolutely. The 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 question is how to facilitate that. Um, I can tell you from the China side, there's a great desire to connect with the Indian tool makers.
Okay.
Um, but I don't, from the Indian side, I don't see the the same attitude. Um, and so I think there's some blockers in this, but I will say that, you know, right now China tool makers, for the most part, that their growth has gone flat. If not, if not down. If for many, they're not as busy as they used to be. And
Okay.
the ones that are still busy, they don't see that unlimited growth that they used to see.
Okay.
So so they're well aware of the situation. And you know, when um, about it about a year ago, I went back to China just to visit some old friends and colleagues, and um, because you know because of COVID, I hadn't been there for a few years, and
Right.
and every single one of them was asking me, "What about India? What's going on in India? Um, you know, what are they building tooling? What you know, are they any good? Or, you know, they're very curious, of course. Just like we were curious when China was coming up, you know, in the early days. Um, but they see uh, they see the trend. They know the trend. They know that geopolitical winds have shifted and work is moving away from them to
Right.
other places, largely India, and they're curious. Their motivation is they want to retain, or they want a slice of the India pie.
Right.
Okay, um, fine, that's not a bad thing, but I think Indian tool makers, like I said, are not really ready to uh, take up the opportunities in the EMS industry that are flooding in. Um, so some kind of mutually beneficial alignment with Chinese toolmaker would benefit our Indian toolmakers also. Um, I think the big blocker is trust. You know, in especially if you're not familiar with any China tool makers. You know, it's like how can I partner with them? How can I trust them? Well, you know, they don't know Indian tool makers either.
Right. Right.
They also see it as a risk. But
Right. Okay.
it, I know there are many Indian tool makers that are honest and would make a good partner. And I can say that there are many Chinese tool makers that would also make a good partner. We just have to, define the relationship, the business relationship. The other thing is Chinese tool makers are cash rich. They've been dominating this for the past 20 years, and a
Right.
lot of them have money to invest. Whereas getting capital might be difficult for an Indian tool maker to expand. Yeah, I honestly think that if we break down some barriers, it could be mutually beneficial. And ultimately, the most beneficial thing for Indian tool makers would be a transfer of knowledge.
Okay.
Okay, you think about it. These are tool makers that I'll just use Samsung as an example, or Dell, or you can use any uh, EMS, OEM. This is tooling that they've been getting done by these Chinese tool makers successfully for a long time. Okay, so on our side, how quickly do you want to be able to take up this challenge and this opportunity uh, as it hits India? And it is hitting, and it's going to hit more and more.
Right.
You don't have 5 years. It would also be in our best interest to I don't want to say take advantage of the Chinese, but there would be a knowledge transfer. You could see how they have been successfully delivering and
Yeah.
adopt a lot of those practices. Um, the Chinese cannot get a visa to come here, but we can get a visa to go to China. I think relatively easy.
But you said that,
There's
they can transfer technology. Do you think they are going to teach or their learnings and their, transfer technology to the Indians? Do you think that will happen?
I think they have no choice if they want a partnership.
Okay.
Again, I'm not talking anything one-sided here. It would have to be mutually beneficial.
Right.
But what do you think the Chinese did 20, 25 years ago?
Yeah.
They
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 well
want to.
they welcomed people like me, and obviously there was a transfer of knowledge. It benefited me, it benefited them. Um,
Yeah.
they did the same thing, and they recognized that uh, when the floodgates were open to them in the late 90s, early 2000, they had to get up to speed quickly. So they took whatever help they can get. I think
Right.
we just need to get over the blockers of not trusting each other and saying how you can structure something. I mean,
Right.
if somebody's interested, I personally know of some tool makers, and I'm not talking big shops. I'm talking relatively small shops, but highly capable.
Okay.
Um, I could facilitate that if anyone's interested. But yeah, sure. Um,
Got it.
for,
So,
u- for, u- for us, it's just a matter of how quickly do you want to get up to speed,
okay.
and because good enough, the attitude I've seen is we're good enough. Well,
Hmm.
you have been good enough, but new challenges are coming, and instead of building tooling in 12 weeks, now you're going to be challenged to build tooling in 4 to 6 weeks, and more precise, and so good enough is no longer good enough. I think there's no sitting on the fence.
Right.
Is the way I look at it.
Got it. Got it. So good enough is not really a good enough now. So
No.
so you spoke about, developing mindset and working on the developing skills also. So can you tell us what technical skill sets are critical for tool makers to cater effectively to the electronics industry, semiconductor industry, connector industry?
Well, I would say I would refer again back to my previous comments of um, think precision and think quality and craftsmanship. Okay, if currently you're not at that level, how can you get to that level? Because that's what the expectation is.
Right.
These companies they expect what they're getting in China, and
Right.
they're in for a shock because they're in most cases they're not going to get it, and they have to adjust their expectations. But nevertheless, the ones here that can meet those expectations are going to reap the the biggest benefits, and they're going to stand head and shoulders. So, as far as skill sets, I think you can never get away from the basics, right? You can uh, you have to. I think tool makers are going to need to be, if you're not already adept at tool design,
Mhm.
that's going to be a big requirement. Maybe a lot of tool makers have their customer gives them, the design and they just manufacture. But I think more and more design will play a bigger role. So die designers, mold designers, fixture designer, um, uh,
Right.
because the other side is we need to be profitable, and uh, that starts with the tool design for manufacturing. Um, as far as really advanced technology, uh, if you're not highly skilled at with all the traditional machining processes, with milling, grinding, EDM,
Mhm.
wire EDM is huge for molds and dies.
Right.
Um, for connectors, extreme precision and surface grinding is those shops always are heavy on surface grinders. But that's all existing technology. Just have to get very, very proficient at it. The one thing I would say is maybe 3D printing of metal. Uh,
Okay.
um, For conformal cooling,
Got
that would apply more to cases and housings type parts.
right.
Um, but also it could eliminate some of the machining processes,
Okay.
you know.
Right. Can you talk a little bit about your own tooling setup at Tata Electronics? What kind of setup you have? How many molds, or what percent of your own mold are catered by the Indian companies, or you have to import? Anything you can talk about that?
I can talk a little bit about it.
Yeah.
The the physical setup, we have about 35,000 square feet facility right now. Uh, uh, I think 12 EMCs,
Okay.
uh, three wire EDM, 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 sinker EDMs,
Okay.
uh, a few manual mills and manual surface grinders. We do our own heat treatment in house.
Okay.
The vacuum heat treatment we do in-house. And it's all state of the art. It's a very, very nice tool room. It's a good clean environment.
Right.
Air conditioned, well lit. It's and very safe. So that's our physical setup. We also have one ZK brand automation cell, which
Okay.
we're commissioning. And that's another thing, because of the lack of manpower available and the time it
Right.
takes to train. Again, try to design that out of your system with some automation. And it doesn't
Right.
need to be a full-blown cell like we have with three EDMs and three VMCs and the CMM. It could just be two VMCs with a robot between them for loading and unloading.
Okay.
You can start on a small scale, but eliminating the need for skilled manpower or reducing it is, I think, essential for moving ahead. All our molds, right, currently, we're focused almost entirely on injection molds. We
Okay.
make some very complex molds. Um, and all our molds are built in-house.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. This is a customer requirement.
Right.
Now we can outsource some non-critical mold elements such as wear plates and guide rails and things like that.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but definitely core and cavity and all the precise parts are done in-house. But now
Okay.
we're also but the process of making a mobile phone is a lot more than injection molds.
Okay.
We do a lot of machining. We've got several thousand VMC machines. Every one requires fixturing,
Okay.
and so we outsource a huge amount of fixturing for every new model. And right now, there's nobody in India that can take up this volume, and very few that could actually even take do it with the precision required. So that's still all being done in China. That
Okay.
right there is an enormous opportunity for somebody in India to step up. It would require a pretty large investment, but we have easily 20-30,000 fixtures
Right.
uh, per project that need to be made, and these are not simple fixtures. So that's just one example of opportunity. Now with the semiconductor side coming up,
Right.
I'm not that familiar with it, but I recently looked at what kind of tooling they need, and it's also big volume and very, very precise. And that's all coming from Taiwan and Japan right now,
Right.
and some from China.
Got it. Got it. So just last question from my side before we take questions from the audience, and I can already see there are so many questions pouring in, and yeah. So if you guys have more questions, just post it in chat box, and after our conversation, I'll take it up with Mr. Jim. So last question, Mr. Jim, from my side, it's what advice would you give to an Indian tool maker aspiring to be successful in fast-growing electronics industry?
Oh, wow. Um, I would say understand the requirements and understand your competition. And your
Okay.
competition is not the tool shop down the street. The competition is in China. You have an advantage in that the customers are actively trying to move work from China. So
Right.
that gives you an open door, but that doesn't guarantee you the work. So I would say the more you know about the requirements of EMS, and start making a game plan. How can you go from wherever you are to where you need to be to meet those requirements? And those are going to be precision,
Right.
machining to 5 to 10 micron. If you can't do that right now reliably, then what's it going to take? And the second one would be understanding what the customers' requirements are, and that's going to be exactly what your competition in China is already delivering.
Right.
And most of all, I would say be humble, because you'll never get to where you need to be if you think you're already there.
Right.
So it takes some humility, but I mean, it just takes a desire to be the best and to make money, right? Let's face it, we're all in this to make money,
Right.
and that requires uh, being able to deliver at least as well as what they're getting from China right now. That, that would be my advice.
That's great. I think I am sure everyone has learned. And for me, if I have to list down some of the takeaways from our discussion, is that the electronic industry is growing. It is going to create huge demand for the tool maker, but we aren't prepared yet. We need to kind of develop the culture of innovation and precision. We need to develop a mindset for the same. We also need to work hard on skill development. If Chinese can't come, we go to China and kind of make most of this kind of collaboration and learn from them. And your advice is that be open, be humble, and accept the challenge that is thrown to you, and then make most of the opportunity.
Yeah, let me give you one example of humility.
Right.
When I first worked in China, I didn't go there as an expat for a big OEM. I went to work for a Chinese mold maker,
Oh,
uh,
okay.
and they were one of the top mold makers in China, and one of the first good mold makers in China. I went in 2009, and they had already become pretty mature. They were doing connector tooling out. I was their customer working at Tyco USA at the time. So I knew them well. And anyway, I ended up going to work for them. And I was the first and only foreigner. And I remember addressing the whole team. And this was a good sized tool shop. I addressed the whole team when I first got there, and I told them, I said, you guys are 80 to 90% where we need you to be, 80 to 90% world class. But there's some gaps, and that's I'm going to help you, you know. But the GM at the time, he stopped me right there. He said, you're too generous. We have a lot to learn. And that attitude is exactly why they were able to even get up to that 80 to 90% in the first place, because they had some humility. Uh, they could have easily claimed that they were the best because they were that close. Um, so I think we need to maybe adopt some of that attitude.
Got it. That's something to learn. So, all right, let me start taking questions from top. There are actually so many questions. First question is from Mr. Bhila Patil. He says, "Good afternoon, Mr. Jim. Like IMF, IML, IMD, plastic molds, is Tata Electronics require IME as an in mold electronic precision mold? If yes, then who is making such molds? China or Indian tool maker? Or if no, then was if no, then is there any future requirement for Indian tooling industry?"
Um, let me clarify. IME is in mold. What's he saying? In mold
Yeah,
electronics.
IME in mold electronics precision molds.
I think maybe he's referring to maybe the overmolding of electronics, the encapsulation, which
Okay,
is done by normally by epoxy potting, which is a slow process. In the
right.
past, I have done encapsulation molds of a low pressure polyamide material. Tata Electronics currently does not have that requirement, but
Okay, okay,
from what I recently learned of the semiconductor business, that there is some amount of that.
right. Okay,
I don't know of anyone in India doing that.
right. There is another question from Mr. Srinivas Nair. When comparing Indian tool makers with those from China, how would you assess Indian tool makers? What are our strength and weakness, and how can we address our weakness effectively? I think some part of this you have answered in our conversation, but yeah, if you can answer that.
Well, I think the the defining characteristic of a Chinese mold maker is they will, number one, they act quickly. There's the hierarchy is such that when the boss says go, that they go, and there are very few blockers. So they and then they move fast. The 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 time it takes Tata Electronics to release a PO in China, they would have the job done. If we're talking about a modification, an ECN or something like that.
Right,
Um, and the availability of raw materials is the supply chain is local. It's so good. So that's one of our weaknesses, I would say, is too much talk and not enough action. And this is what the customers are used to getting. So anything less, and they feel uh, they they feel disappointed. Um, and the other thing is they will do anything to get the job done.
okay,
Literally anything. I've called on when I was in the U.S. and I had Chinese uh, suppliers, and I would call them anytime, day or night. I would call directly to the boss, and he would have people. He would get people out of bed to go work if they weren't already working, and uh, he didn't wait for a purchase order. And I don't advocate asking suppliers to do that, but I'm just telling you, this is this is what they're giving uh,
yeah,
to their customers. That attitude of whatever it takes, they will get it done, and their businesses are structured where they can do that.
right. Uh, Another question from Mr. Prakash. To overcome the scarcity of tool maker, is there any plan for tooling institution by Tata? Oh,
Good question. Yeah, there is, but we have many things in the pipeline, so I'm not sure how quickly it's going to happen. But uh, I mentioned that about my tool room. Well, we have plans to double and triple the size of our tool room by doing more of these fixtures. Like I said, we need 10, 20, 30,000 fixtures. We're going to start doing the development of those in-house, and then but we'll still need suppliers to do the mass volumes. So yeah, we have many things in the pipeline, but one of my tasks at some point before I leave India is to set up an internal apprenticeship program. But to do this and make it successful, it has to be, we have to change the perception of the industry of a tool maker from
right.
being not well respected to that of a skilled craftsman, and they'll need to be paid accordingly, right? I mean, if they can make as much money delivering Swiggy as they can running a machine, then you're never going to build craftsmen that way. So yes, I don't have a lot of details on that, but that's one of my tasks at Tata Electronics, is to set that up. And I think that'll be a game changer, and
Okay.
a prototype maybe for um, how other training centers can be set up and existing ones improved.
Got it. We'll take few more questions. It's already 4:30. There's a question from Mr. Arun Vinay Prabhakaran. Dear sir, is there any requirement or demand for die casting tooling, AI and MG in electronics? If so, what parts? If so, what parts and critical requirements on same?
Um, I think for what we're currently doing with mobile phones, there's not much demand for die casting.
Okay.
There is some demand for metal injection molding. As far as components inside the phone, and as well as some components on this huge volume of fixtures we need. So probably more MIM than die casting, uh, from what I know,
Okay.
from what I've seen. Yeah.
Got it.
One other thing, as far as skill sets that I can recommend, those of you who are into injection molds, you need to understand the molding side of injection molding. And it seems to me the gold standard is learning scientific injection molding.
Right.
And this even if you're not doing molding, maybe you're just making the molds, but if you're designing the molds, you have to understand the whole process. And one of our own teaches scientific injection molding, Subash.
Yeah.
Um, I think you mentioned that he, he's he's going to do some training for Tagma, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
there's other resources, but that's a local one, and very important. If you're involved in mold building, mold tooling, whether you're actually, I mean, if you're doing injection molding, then the big OEMs in the electronics industry are going to expect you to understand scientific injection molding. It's all about process development and a systematic method. So I just wanted to throw that in.
Right. One question from Mr. Rajat Ulvekar. Could you share some insight on how additive manufacturing can play a role in EMS market and at your own facility? Would it bring cost saving or increase your production efficiency? It would be great to understand how this would work.
Um, can you repeat the first part of that? Uh,
Could you share some insights on how additive manufacturing can play a
oh,
role in EMS market and at your own facility?
uh, in our own facility, additive, um, uh, we, for tooling, we're currently not doing any, but for, because, our molds are, uh, high volume molds where, they run millions of shots, but, um, additive manufacturing, we are planning to use that more and more for different types of fixtures and end of arm tooling on robots and things like that. It could have a I think a very big impact on that, and saving a lot of machining time. We're just starting to do some of that.
Okay, okay. Question from Mr. Rajesh Gupta. Are you using solid PCD toolings for side machining and profile machining on thin wall component?
Again, repeat that.
Are you
Or,
using solid PCD toolings for side machining and profile machining on thin wall components?
uh, thin wall, no, currently, no, we're not. Our,
Uh,
our, our products don't require that.
Okay, okay. Question from Mr. Gopala Krishnan. Actually, there are so many questions. How critical is the role of jigs and fixture for the kind of components that you make? What is the preferred material for jigs and fixture? Is steel or high strength is aluminum?
Well, jigs and fixtures, in the tool room, whenever we, uh, um, when we try to optimize efficiency, we make our own machining fixtures for the mold elements.
Right,
And again, that's where the skill level comes in. Somebody smart enough to be able to identify that and design those fixtures.
right,
But in the whole manufacturing process that we do, um, fixtures, like I said, we have thousands of VMC machines, machining product,
right.
and every one of those has uh, jigs and fixtures, as well as assembly. Many small jigs and fixtures and small special machines with might have a few air cylinders on it and a small PLC. That all requires jigs and fixtures. Jigs and fixtures are a huge part of Tata's business,
Okay.
but currently we're not doing that in-house.
Okay.
We will be in the future because
And what is the preferred material for jigs and fixture? Is it steel or high strength aluminum?
um, it's a combination. It just depends on the application. For machining fixtures, it's a lot of uh, tool steel, a lot of stainless steel, but also a mix of aluminum. Like the assembly fixtures are mostly aluminum. So
Okay.
yeah, quite a mix.
Got it. Got it. Uh, Last point is from Mr. Subhas. Yeah, you mentioned his name. So thanks for a wonderful insight. I think it's not a question but a remark. Cultural change takes time, but are there any quick improvements Indian tool makers can implement within the shortest time possible using their current capabilities to achieve meaningful progress? What do you think?
Yeah, definitely culture takes time to change.
Right.
So that's where, okay, the gap is the skilled manpower. Okay,
Right.
so trying to avoid that or minimize that is going to be the probably give you the most immediate results, and that would be by some level of automation. Okay, it
Right.
requires some investment for sure, and I understand not everybody's in a position to do that, but this is also where, okay, you if you're stuck, you're not in a position where you see any way to make meaningful progress without a huge investment. That's where, maybe some kind of joint venture partnership with a Chinese shop could be mutually beneficial. Of course, it has to
Got it.
be mutually beneficial with leaning towards, long-term benefit for us. And yeah, there's not a lot of shortcuts, unfortunately.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Thanks for all your insights and being candidly answering all the questions and also taking questions from the audience. There are so many questions and you have answered everything patiently. And I'm sure everyone has learned something new today. And yeah, there are so many actually questions about asking about your email ID. How do you answer
Right.
that? Yeah.
Well, I can share my email address. I'll
Okay, so if you have
yeah,
a consent, then probably people who ask me, I can share your email
yeah,
address to them.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm quite happy to help in any way I can. My bandwidth is limited with my responsibilities, but I'm passionate about the industry, passionate about the industry in India, and
Right.
let me close by saying that um, I think um, everything that I said, please don't take it in a negative way. It's just reality. So
Right.
at the end of the day, all that matters is what you can deliver. And if that meets the customer requirement. Um, but I'm hopeful. I'm here. I'm in the trenches every day with you guys. And I believe that India will take up this challenge and these opportunities in the best way possible. And I'm very optimistic. So I know I'll do what I can at Tata Electronics and help the industry in any way I can.
Right. Great. Thank you so much. And thanks for offering all the help to the Indian tooling community. And I'm sure we have a lot to learn from you. Uh, Thank you so much. And stay tuned for the next session. Thanks to SNT Group for sponsoring this tool talk. Thank you so much, everyone, people who attended and shared question and engaged with the overall sessions. Thank you so much. Thanks. Bye bye.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.